All right. This is the last chapter that I'm going to be reading to you. It's chapter 19 of Pagoo, so we're almost to the end, and we'll be on 14 of our packet, which I think the only question on there is, what does old instinct tell Pagoo at the end of chapter 19? And so, he's down in Deep Hole here now with the octopus, which here's some pictures behind of what these wonderful, interesting invertebrates look like. But chapter 19 is called, Can This Be the End of Pagoo? So inside his new shell, deep in his crack, down in the cave of Deep Hole, Pagoo was motionless. Both eye stalks pointed toward the pale octopus, this 8-armed mollusk, this soft cousin of mussels and clams and oysters, may not have seen Pagoo. Of course she could have seen Pagoo. Now that her day's sleep had ended, she opened her soft, wrinkled eyelids. Her eyes were almost like human eyes, and her sight was keen and hidden between those huge eyes that lay. There was a remarkable brain. Perhaps she had spied Pagoo from the first time, had just calmly watched him back into the crack. Perhaps her mollusk brain was planning tricks to play on this crustacean. With night, a weird cold light flooded down Deep Hole. It was a night when the sea fire danced on the surface and foaming waves flashed white into the depths. Tiny, luminous creatures swirled like fireflies, collected crowds, and coated the rocks with silver. Their sparks showered down on the shell heap by the cave, and the currents fanned the shells into glowing coals. The glow spread into the cave until the octopus herself shone like a pale paper lantern. Pagoo watched, her tentacles shimmering like ribbons. Shuffling her tentacles, the octopus slowly turned toward Pagoo. Small spurts of mud leaped from the floor as her body lifted and drifted toward his hiding place. She had pumped a few bursts of water through her funnel, a short pipe at her side. She could walk when she wished to, or she could be jet-propelled with speed. Frightened, Pagoo trembled. Her eyes. One of them surely spied him in his shell, yet she wasn't attacking the little hermit. She turned toward the cave door. Thin body flaps hung down between her tentacles. These are like these right here, these body flaps, right down in there. They hung down between her tentacles. She shuffled outside like a little old lady hunched in a flopping wrapper tied with too many cords. She did not even glance at Pagoo. He sagged, as though heaving a great sigh of relief. Don't relax, hissed old instinct. And so Pagoo went rigid again. Don't relax for a second. You would come here, and now you're trapped. 1 minute you're frightened to death, and the next you think maybe you're not scared of this humble-looking lady. Lady? She's not. She's a witch, and you watch out for her. This witch of Deep Hole had a magic wand. At least it seemed to do magic things. She unrolled a tentacle and stretched it toward a rock 2 feet away. The rock gleamed with tiny bright lights, and its center held a cluster of stars. When the star cluster moved, Pagoo knew what it was. A snail in its shell, busily grazing. The witch lifted and pointed her wand at the snail. Goggle-eyed, Pagoo leaned forward until old instinct growled, Get back inside! The tentacle was smooth as a garden hose on top, but its underside was lumpy with suckers. These suction cups looked like a double roll of small white donuts. Now, the tip of the witch's wand plucked the shell from the rock. The snail slammed its operculum door shut, but that would not help this doomed animal. It already was riding the conveyor belt down the underside of the tentacles, one one sucker at a time. Like an old-fashioned bucket brigade, the suction cup stretched and passed the shell further along in a steady, rippling movement. As the wand's tip explored for another morsel, Pagoo, in his crack, could not look upward and see what became of the snail. While Pagoo stared, the witch tilted backward a bit. Her tentacles spread from her body like the spokes of a wheel. The wheel's center hole was the mouth, which hid the only parts of an octopus, and that was its jaws, upper and lower. They were the size and shape of a parrot's beak, but yet Pagoo had not seen those jaws. The conveyor belt brought the snail near the octopus's mouth. While a few suction cups clutched the shell, one or two neatly sucked out the snail. Then, for an instant, Pagoo saw a flash of the black hooked beak. It killed the snail. It tore the snail apart, and the pieces vanished into the mouth. Meanwhile, using a tentacle as a broom, the witch swept the empty shell outside into her trash heap. Oh, this lady was fussy about keeping her cave clean. She dumped out her victim's hard, bony remains. And that's kind of what they do. They will find themselves in a cave. I thought I had one here where they would send all the shells out, keeping their place nice and neat. Calmly, the witch stretched out her wand toward another snail. Oh my goodness, Pagoo could not stay here. Gingerly, he put his feet down, he slid from the crack, he tiptoed outside and ran. He galloped and slid across the mud. He reached the steep rock leading from Deep Hole. He climbed among the lights, and then he looked down. And there she was, below, looking up at him with those awful eyes. She had caught the second snail while she watched Pagoo escaping. Perhaps it was all part of her fun, just to let him run and reach the rock before following in one jet-swift movement. A tentacle shot upward. Its tip lassoed Pagoo's shell, with Pagoo inside. Still clutching Pagoo, the witch let her lasso rest a moment. After all, this fat little hermit would have to wait his turn. She would hold him there while she ran the last of the snail through its finishing process. So far, this evening of hunting had been so good for her. With the tentacle wrapped around his doorway, Pagoo could not drop out and escape, even if he had the courage. From somewhere far inside, he heard a whisper. "This looks like the ending, son. Sure does. In and out of a sculpin was one thing. You stayed in one piece. But this witch's beak sort of mangles things. I'm sad that old instinct won't advise your children and your children's children. While new ages roll and surge over the tide pools, I tried to pass along lessons learned by your ancestors. They learned them the hard way too, son, and it wasn't too easy to send their lessons on to you, because you wouldn't always listen. You thought you knew it all. And now this chain is going to be broken. And well, goodbye." And here's a picture of the octopus. And you can see here, where's little Pagoo? He's there at the very end of her tentacle, getting ready to be devoured by the witch of the tide pool. Okay, that is the end of chapter 19. There's one more chapter left. That would be chapter 20. I hope you guys enjoyed the story of Pagoo so far. I love reading it every year. So, okay,